Dr. Ellie Sato wasn't expecting visitors that Tuesday morning, certainly not the extraterrestrial kind. She was hunched over her data pad, cursing the budget cuts that had reduced the Lazarus Sanctuary's security system to basically a fancy motion detector with delusions of grandeur, when the first tremors rattled her coffee. "Fantastic," she muttered, watching the precious caffeine slosh over her lab reports. Because this day needed the added excitement of a low-grade earthquake. The tremors intensified. Outside her window, ancient redwoods swayed like saplings in a breeze. Birds, real ones, not the lab-grown variety they were rehabilitating, scattered across the pewter-gray sky. Through the canopy, she glimpsed something metallic and massive descending in a controlled fall that was about as subtle as a sledgehammer to the face. Ellie's comm unit buzzed. "Dr. Sato? Are you seeing this?" It was Kian, her research assistant and the only other full-time staff at the facility. "Unless I've finally lost my mind from isolation, there's a goddamn spaceship landing in my forest." Kian made a sound that fell somewhere between a laugh and a whimper. "We should probably, call someone." "Who exactly? The underfunded Park Service? The military that couldn't care less about this backwater preserve? The news networks that'll turn our sanctuary into a circus?" Ellie grabbed her field kit. "I'm heading out there." "Wait. Standard protocol for unknown." "Kian, there's no protocol for this. But whatever's happening, it's happening in the middle of 3 highly unstable species reintroduction zones. If those habitats get disturbed..." "Right behind you," Kian sighed. "Just try not to get probed or disintegrated before I catch up." Ellie navigated the forest paths with practiced ease, her mind racing through the implications. The Lazarus Sanctuary wasn't on any major maps. Hidden in a remote corner of what used to be the Pacific Northwest, it was deliberately kept off the grid, a protected space where extinct species, painstakingly reconstructed from recovered DNA, could be reintroduced to Earth's ecosystem without human interference. Well, minimal human interference. Just her, Kian, and about 30 species that hadn't walked the planet in centuries. The craft had settled in Sector 7, home to the recently reintroduced Tasmanian tigers and a small pack of dire wolves. As Ellie approached, she activated her biometric shield, a thin force field that would, theoretically, protect her from most terrestrial threats. Alien threats? That was anybody's guess. What struck her first wasn't the ship's imposing presence but the curious silence surrounding it. No birds called. No insects buzzed. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. The vessel itself defied conventional design. No sleek, aerodynamic lines or gleaming chrome like in the vids. Instead, it resembled a massive, angular insect, all sharp edges and matte black surfaces that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. Strange symbols pulsed along its hull in a sickly green glow. Heat rippled from its underside, scorching the forest floor beneath. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me," Ellie hissed, noticing the charred remains of a monitoring station beneath one of the ship's massive landing struts. 6 months of migration data, gone. Cosmic tourists with the parking skills of a drunk teenager. Something moved in the shadows of the trees. Ellie froze, her hand instinctively reaching for the tranquilizer gun at her hip, standard equipment for when the resurrected predators got overly curious about their human caretakers. A figure emerged, and Ellie's scientific mind struggled to categorize what she was seeing. It stood nearly 7 feet tall with a humanoid build that seemed both familiar and wrong, like viewing anatomy through a funhouse mirror. Its skin, if that's what it was, shimmered with a metallic iridescence that shifted colors with each movement. Instead of a face, a smooth, reflective surface curved where features should be, occasionally rippling like disturbed water. The being tilted its non-head, regarding her with an attention she could feel but not see. "Look," Ellie said, finding her voice despite the thundering of her heart, "you're trespassing in a closed ecological preserve. Whatever interstellar road trip you're on, you've taken a very wrong turn." The being made no sound, but the air around it vibrated with a frequency that made Ellie's teeth ache. Behind it, a seam appeared in the ship's hull, widening into an entrance. More figures emerged, similar in their unsettling appearance, moving with an eerie, fluid grace that suggested bones were an optional part of their anatomy. Dr. Sato. Kian's voice crackled through her calm, I'm at the edge of Sector 7. Should I, holy shit. The aliens' heads, or what passed for them, swiveled in perfect unison toward the sound of Kian's voice. Stay back, Ellie warned, but it was too late. The creatures moved with startling speed, flowing rather than running through the underbrush toward Kian's position. Ellie sprinted after them, cursing her human limitations. As she rounded a massive fallen sequoia, she nearly collided with Kian, who stood frozen, surrounded by the alien visitors. Hey! Ellie shouted, brandishing her tranquilizer gun uselessly. Back off! To her surprise, the beings retreated several steps. Their reflective faces rippled more intensely now, colors flashing beneath the surface like electric currents. Kian, a lanky 20-something with more enthusiasm than self-preservation, whispered, Are they, talking to each other? I think so, Ellie murmured. But not in any way we'd recognize. The tallest of the beings stepped forward. Its non-face tilted toward them, then up at the forest canopy, then at the ground. With a movement too quick to follow, it produced an object, sleek and curved, fitting its strange hand like an extension of its body. Oh shit, Kian breathed. Is that a weapon? Before Ellie could respond, the being aimed the device at the ground. A pulse of energy, visible as a distortion in the air rather than a beam, shot forth. The forest floor trembled. Fallen leaves shivered. And then, impossibly, the soil began to part, revealing a complex network of roots and fungal threads glowing with a bioluminescence that shouldn't have been there. What the hell? Ellie whispered, scientific curiosity momentarily overshadowing fear. The being made a gesture that somehow conveyed disappointment despite its lack of expression. It turned to its companions, and their surfaces rippled in an agitated pattern. I don't think they expected to find this place, Kian said slowly. Like, specifically this forest. A sudden, ear-splitting roar shattered the tense tableau. The beings whirled around as one, their surfaces flashing alarm in vivid crimson pulses. Ellie's heart sank. Oh no. Crashing through the underbrush came the largest of the dire wolves, a magnificent beast they'd named Ragnar, with silver-streaked fur and eyes that held the ancient intelligence of a species that had once ruled these forests. And he wasn't alone. Behind him, the entire pack emerged, 7 massive predators moving with the coordinated precision that had made their ancestors such successful hunters. They're not supposed to be in this sector today, Kian hissed. The migration pattern got disrupted by a massive alien ship pancaking their territory, Ellie finished. Kian, whatever happens, do not run. The wolves spread out, instinctively encircling both humans and aliens. Ragnar's attention, however, remained fixed on the visitors, his hackles raised, teeth bared in a snarl that exposed fangs the size of hunting knives. The alien surfaces rippled with what Ellie could only interpret as surprise. The one with the device, she mentally dubbed it, the leader, made a series of quick gestures. The others moved into a defensive formation that seemed oddly familiar to Ellie. Are they, hunters? She whispered to Kian. Her question was answered when one of the beings produced another device that unfurled into something resembling a spear, if spears were made of living metal that constantly reshaped itself. No, 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 Ellie said, stepping forward despite every survival instinct screaming otherwise. You are not hunting endangered species on my watch. The leader turned its attention to her, its reflective surface showing her own distorted image back at her. The air vibrated again with that teeth-aching frequency. And then, to Ellie's shock, words formed, not spoken, but somehow projected directly into her mind. Incorrect location. Sequence compromised. Ellie blinked. You can communicate. Great. Communicate this, put away your weapons and back off from the wolves. These creatures Not like records. Records? What records? The vibration intensified, causing Kian to wince and cover his ears. Error in navigation. This is not the designated hunting reserve. Understanding dawned on Ellie with a chill that had nothing to do with the forest's cool air. You thought this was a hunting ground. Sanctuary coordinates were provided. Payment processed. Predator species guaranteed. Ellie almost laughed despite the absurdity of the situation. Oh my God. You're not invaders. You're tourists. Space tourists on a safari gone wrong. The leader's surface rippled in what might have been embarrassment. The brochure promised authentic prehistoric Earth predators. Well, you got that part right, Kian muttered, nodding toward Ragnar, who had begun slowly advancing on the aliens, the rest of his pack following his lead. The leader raised its device again, and Ellie moved without thinking, placing herself between the alien and the wolves. No. These animals are critically endangered. They're part of a restoration project. They're not game for someone's interstellar trophy room. The contract specifies. I don't care what your contract specifies. This is a protected sanctuary. Whatever travel agency booked this trip screwed up. These animals are under my protection. The wolves had paused, seemingly confused by Ellie's intervention. Ragnar growled low in his throat, his intelligent eyes never leaving the aliens. The leader's surface rippled in what Ellie was beginning to recognize as agitation. The hunt was purchased at considerable expense. Then I suggest you get a refund, Ellie said firmly. Now, you need to leave before. A series of sharp barks interrupted her. Not from the dire wolves, but from the trees beyond. Ellie's blood ran cold. The Tasmanian tigers, or thylacines as they were properly known, were responding to the commotion. And unlike the wolves, who were cautious by nature, the thylacines were notoriously aggressive when startled. The alien surfaces flashed with colors Ellie couldn't even name. More specimens. Unexpected variety. No. Absolutely not. Those are also protected. Look, I understand there's been a mistake, but you need to get back in your ship and leave. Now. The contract is void, Ellie snapped. Hunting here is illegal under Earth law and about a dozen international treaties. Unless you want to create an interplanetary incident. The leader seemed to consider this, its surface swirling with contemplative patterns. What alternative do you propose? Before Ellie could answer, a new sound echoed through the forest, a deep, reverberating bellow that made even the massive dire wolves flinch. Kian went pale. That's not possible. They're secured in Sector 12. The containment fields must have failed when the ship landed, Ellie finished, a cold dread settling in her stomach. The electromagnetic pulse would have disrupted the barriers. What approaches? The leader's communication carried an undercurrent of what might have been excitement. Ellie turned to the aliens, her expression deadly serious. Something that's been extinct for 10,000 years. Something we've only recently stabilized genetically. Something that, frankly, you're not equipped to handle. As if on cue, trees at the far edge of the clearing began to sway and fall. Birds erupted from the canopy in panicked clouds. Even Ragnar and his pack retreated, melting back into the forest with the instinctive respect of predators recognizing something higher on the food chain. The ground trembled with each massive footfall. The air filled with the musty, primal scent of a creature that had once ruled the ancient forests of North America. What is this species? The leader's communication trembled with what could only be described as awe. Ellie's answer was drowned out by a roar that seemed to shake the very air, a sound not heard on Earth since the last ice age. Through the falling trees emerged a beast of impossible proportions. 12 feet tall at the shoulder, with a massive head crowned by antlers spanning 14 feet from tip to tip, the Irish elk was the largest deer that had ever existed. And this bull, the first successful resurrection of his kind, was not pleased about the disturbance in his territory. "You wanted prehistoric Earth predators," Ellie said grimly. "Well, during mating season, that counts." The massive elk lowered its head, antlers forward like living battering rams, and charged. The aliens scattered with a speed that belied their size, diving away from the charging behemoth with movements more liquid than solid. The leader, however, stood its ground, device raised. "Don't!" Ellie shouted, but it was too late. A pulse of energy shot toward the elk. It struck the massive beast's shoulder, causing it to stumble mid-charge. But rather than falling, the elk shook its enormous head and redirected its fury toward the leader. "Kian, Emergency Protocol 7. Ellie yelled, already sprinting toward her equipment bag. "Are you serious? That's experimental at best." Kian shouted back, but he was already pulling out a small silver canister from his own pack. The elk closed in on the leader, which was frantically adjusting its device, its surface flashing warning colors. The other aliens moved to intercept, their weapons morphing into various configurations, but they seemed reluctant to use lethal force. "Why does it resist neural disruption?" The leader's communication carried a distinct note of panic. "Because," Ellie panted, fumbling with her equipment, "we had to alter their neural pathways to make the resurrection viable. Their brains don't work quite like the original specimens." The elk lowered its massive antlers, preparing for a lethal sweep that would impale the leader or toss it 30 feet into the air, neither outcome favorable for diplomatic relations. Ellie activated the sonic emitter in her hand. A high-pitched frequency, inaudible to human ears but precisely calibrated to the elk's altered auditory system, cut through the chaos. The massive creature halted, its ears twitching in confusion. Kian opened his canister, releasing a cloud of pheromones specific to Irish elk females, a synthetic attractant designed for emergency redirection. The elk's aggression faltered. It raised its head, nostrils flaring as it processed the conflicting signals. "Back away slowly," Ellie instructed the aliens. "No sudden movements." The leader's surface rippled with what might have been relief. It and its companions began a careful retreat toward their ship. The elk, momentarily distracted by the pheromones, suddenly shook its massive head as if clearing it. Its gaze locked onto the retreating aliens once more. "The disruption field from their weapons must be interfering with the pheromones," Kian hissed. Ellie cursed under her breath. "We need a new plan. Fast." "Perhaps we can assist," the leader projected, its earlier hostility replaced by the universal language of not wanting to die. "Our vessel contains technology designed for specimen containment." "You mean cages?" Ellie retorted, keeping her eyes on the increasingly agitated elk. "Temporary spatial restriction fields. Non harmful. Used to transport live specimens." The elk pawed the ground, preparing for another charge. "Fine," Ellie conceded. "But just to contain it until we can get it back to its enclosure. No trophies, no samples, no souvenirs." "Agreed." The leader made a series of gestures toward its ship. The hull shimmered, and a portion of it detached, a drone-like object that hovered silently before zooming toward them. The elk charged again. Ellie and Kian dived in opposite directions. The aliens scattered once more. But this time, the drone positioned itself directly in the elk's path. A field of shimmering energy erupted from the device, encapsulating the massive beast mid-stride. The elk continued its motion for a moment before realizing it was making no progress, trapped in what appeared to be a bubble of gently pulsing light. "Incredible," Kian breathed, picking himself up from the forest floor. "The containment doesn't even seem to be causing distress." It was true. The elk, while clearly confused, showed none of the panic typical of captured megafauna. It moved within the field, testing its boundaries with surprisingly little aggression. "The field adapts to the specimen's neural patterns," the leader explained. "It creates a calming effect specific to the species." "That kind of technology could revolutionize our work," Ellie said, her scientific mind already racing with possibilities. The leader's surface rippled in what might have been the alien equivalent of a shrug. It is standard equipment for recreational hunters. Recreational? Kian echoed, disgust evident in his tone. Our species has evolved beyond the need for hunting as sustenance, the leader projected. What remains is the cultural practice, a connection to our evolutionary past. So you travel across the galaxy to kill things for fun, Ellie said flatly. The leader's surface swirled with complicated patterns. Not kill. Challenge. Face. Understand. The specimens are released unharmed after the hunt. Wait, Ellie frowned. You don't take trophies. What value is there in a dead thing? The leader seemed genuinely confused. The value is in the encounter. The knowledge. The experience of facing a worthy adversary. Kian looked skeptical. So what's the point if you don't, kill anything? To know it. To understand its ways. To face it as equals and part with mutual respect. Ellie studied the alien with newfound curiosity. You're not hunters in the way we understand it. You're more like naturalists. Field researchers. We are Vess'tai, the leader projected, as if that explained everything. We seek knowledge through direct experience. One of the other aliens approached, its surface displaying patterns of urgency. It made gestures toward the ship, which was now emitting a low hum. Our navigation systems have recalibrated, the leader explained. The error has been identified. We were meant to visit the hunting preserve on the third planet of the Sirius system. The coordinates were corrupted. There's a hunting preserve for Earth predators in another star system? Kian asked incredulously. Replicas, the leader clarified. Created from genetic samples obtained during previous visits to your world. A cold realization washed over Ellie. Previous visits? How long has your species been coming to Earth? The leader's surface displayed patterns that somehow conveyed both pride and nostalgia. Our records of visits to this world extend back over 60,000 of your years. 60,000. Ellie felt lightheaded. That predates human civilization. Your species was in its infancy when the Vess'tai first catalogued this world's biodiversity. Kian's eyes widened. You've been observing us the whole time. Through our entire evolution. Intermittently, the leader admitted. Your species was of particular interest due to your unusual cognitive development patterns. We were specimens to you, Ellie said softly, the implication staggering. The leader's surface rippled in what might have been discomfort. All species are specimens and peers. Observers and observed. That is the way of knowledge. The elk, still contained in the energy field, had calmed completely now, watching the proceedings with an almost philosophical patience. If you've been visiting for so long, Ellie said slowly, then you must have records of extinct species. Comprehensive records. Of course. The Vess'tai archive contains detailed biological data on all catalogued species. Including their complete genetic sequences? Kian asked, catching Ellie's drift. Naturally. How else would we create accurate replicas for study? Ellie and Kian exchanged a look charged with possibilities. Do you have any idea how valuable that information would be to our work? Ellie said. We've been piecing together degraded DNA fragments, making educated guesses about gene sequences, trying to reverse engineer millions of years of evolution. Your methods seem inefficient, the leader observed. Because we didn't know aliens had been playing interstellar Pokémon with Earth's biodiversity for millennia. Kian blurted out. The leader's surface rippled in what might have been amusement. An imprecise but not entirely incorrect analogy. Ellie approached the leader, caution giving way to scientific excitement. Would you be willing to share your records? It could save countless species from permanent extinction. The leader's surface stilled, becoming more reflective than ever. Such knowledge transfer is unprecedented. So was landing in the wrong forest and nearly getting skewered by a resurrected Irish elk, Ellie pointed out. I'd say we're all in unprecedented territory. The other aliens gathered around their leader, their surfaces rippling in what appeared to be an intense discussion. Occasionally, one would gesture toward the humans or the contained elk, its movements conveying emotions Ellie couldn't begin to decipher. Finally, the leader turned back to them. A compromise. We cannot share our complete archives, such technology transfer violates our prime directive regarding developing species. Ellie's heart sank. However, the leader continued, we can provide corrected genomic data for the specific species you are currently attempting to resurrect. Consider it. Compensation for the navigation error and subsequent disruption. That's actually incredibly generous, Ellie said, not bothering to hide her surprise. It serves multiple purposes, the leader admitted. Your resurrection projects align with our own interest in biodiversity preservation. And the leader's surface rippled with a pattern Ellie hadn't seen before. I confess a personal curiosity about the outcomes. You want to come back and see how our projects develop, Kian translated. With proper coordination and through appropriate channels, the leader stipulated. No more unexpected landings. Deal, Ellie said without hesitation. But next time, call ahead. The leader produced a small, crystalline object from somewhere within its shifting form. This contains corrected genomic sequences for 300 species native to this region. It is compatible with your rudimentary computing systems. Ellie accepted the crystal with reverence, its surface cool and oddly comforting against her palm. Thank you. This will advance our work by decades. Perhaps, the leader projected, in time, your species will join the interstellar community as full members. Your approach to resurrection biology shows promise. High praise from someone who's been playing God with DNA for millennia, Kian muttered, though there was no real malice in his tone. The leader's surface rippled in what Ellie was now certain was their version of laughter. We do not play at being gods, human. We merely observe the universe's endless variations of life. A pursuit your kind seems to share. With a gesture, the leader commanded the drone to transport the contained elk. The energy bubble, with the massive beast floating serenely inside, drifted toward Sector 12. You'll release it in the proper enclosure? Ellie confirmed. Of course. Our scanning technology has already mapped your facility's layout. The specimen will be returned safely. The other aliens had already begun boarding their ship. The leader lingered, its surface shifting through patterns that seemed somehow wistful. A question, if I may, it projected. Why do you resurrect these creatures? Your resources are limited. Your technology primitive. These efforts require enormous sacrifice for uncertain results. Ellie considered the question seriously. Because we're the reason most of them went extinct in the first place. Humans, I mean. Our ancestors hunted them to extinction, destroyed their habitats, changed the climate. An atonement, then? Partly, Ellie acknowledged. But it's more than that. Each species is a universe of evolutionary solutions, a unique way of being alive. When we lose one, we lose irreplaceable knowledge, perspectives, possibilities. You speak like a Vess'tai, the leader projected, its surface displaying warm, golden ripples. Maybe we're not so different, Ellie suggested. Just at different points in our development. Perhaps. The leader's form began to shift, preparing to return to the ship. Until our next encounter, Dr. Ellie Sato. Ellie blinked in surprise. How do you know my name? The leader's surface rippled with what could only be described as mischief. We have been observing your sanctuary since landing. Your communication methods are transparent to our technology. You've been eavesdropping. We prefer comprehensive environmental assessment, the leader projected, already gliding toward the ship. As the alien vessel prepared for departure, its engines humming with energy that made the air taste like metal, Kian turned to Ellie. "So, how exactly are we going to explain this in our quarterly report?" Ellie laughed, the crystal warm in her palm with the weight of possibilities. "Equipment malfunction. Unexpected weather phenomena. The usual. And the sudden advancement in our genomic database." She smiled, watching as the ship lifted off with surprising grace, the trees barely swaying in its wake. "Let's call it an anonymous donation." The ship ascended, its angular form briefly blotting out the sun before vanishing with a flash that left purple afterimages on Ellie's retinas. From somewhere deep in the forest came the triumphant bugle of the Irish Elk, now safely back in his territory. In the distance, Ragnar and his dire wolves began a haunting, melodic howl, ancient voices singing to the stars that had, against all odds, answered back. Ellie clutched the crystal, its facets catching the afternoon light. "Come on, Kian. We've got work to do." As they walked back toward the laboratory, Ellie couldn't help but look up at the sky, wondering how many other eyes were watching, how many other species across the cosmos were fighting their own battles against extinction, cataloging, preserving, resurrecting. For the first time since taking on the seemingly impossible task of the Lazarus Sanctuary, she felt something she hadn't expected. She felt like part of something larger, a universal effort to ensure that no voice in the cosmic chorus was silenced forever. And somewhere among the stars, traveling back to wherever the Vess'tai called home, she knew the leader was contemplating the same comforting thought. Sometimes, getting lost was the only way to find exactly where you needed to be,